Good morning. We are now live on YouTube. We are continuing from where we left off yesterday. We started looking at Daniel yesterday, and we're going to continue that. I was listening into bits and pieces of it yesterday, and everybody sounded excited that they so excited that they were moving on and going forward with it. So we're going to start with Daniel 1:8, and hopefully we'll get to the end of the chapter. I don't know if Stephen's still there, but would either of you be happy to read or pray?
Hang on a sec. Apologies, I've just got to get the jump leads out, so I'll be indisposed for 5-10 minutes.
Okay then, don't worry.
Cheers.
Okay. Would you like to pray, Carolyn? You're muted though, I can't hear you.
Okay. I'll lift up this time to study your word, and thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to studying it and learning more about it, and about Daniel. It's exciting. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. So I shall read the first bit. I'll do Daniel 1 and do 8 to 16 for now. The title's Daniel's Faithfulness. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave favour and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink. For why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. I'm always fascinated by Daniel and all the amazing things that God does for him and through him. And I think it shows some strength in Daniel, doesn't it, to be able to say, I'm not going to do what everyone else has said to do and what the king said to do, and to trust that God would look after them.
Yeah.
Have you got any thoughts about that, Carolyn?
No, the same really. The fact that he had a mind of his own, and the fact that God willed it so that that the eunuch would abide by his wishes. Yeah.
Oh, we've got Tandy as well this morning. Morning, Tandy.
Good morning. Sorry, I was looking for my unmute button.
That's all right. We're looking at Daniel 1, 8 to 16 at the moment.
to 16. Okay. Yeah.
So it's where Daniel and his friends have decided not to eat what the king has said they should eat and eat vegetables.
Okay, thank you.
Just have a look at what the notes say while Tandy's catching up. So I imagine there are lots of different views as to why they chose to eat vegetables and not what the king gave them. So do you think it's because they thought being vegetarian was better, or do you think it's because they were worried that their food had been offered to idols, or that it was unclean food? Have you got any thoughts about that, either of you?
Just give me a minute. I'm just going to
That's right.
read.
Yeah, it might be that. It might be that. Because he said it was defiled, didn't he?
Yeah.
So, he was very much wanted to do what was right in the Lord's eyes. So, to put that in his body,
Yeah.
he felt that was wrong. Probably.
Yeah. The thing that really stood out to me was where it says, and God gave Daniel favour and compassion in the sight of the chief of eunuchs. So the eunuch was putting themselves at risk, weren't they, for by going with Daniel's wishes and not the king's wishes.
Yeah.
So not only is does Daniel's faith stand out, that he's willing to put himself at risk by not eating what he's been told to eat, but also the eunuch as well.
Yeah.
So they were being trained. They're in training.
Yeah.
So they come into the king's service.
Yes, we looked at that
So
yesterday.
So they're being trained to actually embrace the culture, the values, the morals, everything that the king believes in.
Yeah.
But it puts them in this dilemma where what the king serving this king, and yet they also have their faith on the other hand. A different king, they've come from a different culture. It's a way of getting their old ways out. When you look at even the world systems today, and when you look at this captivity of Babylon, it could be us being not being conformed to the world and to sin and to all the things that could actually lure us, so that we begin to serve the devil rather than our Lord Jesus Christ. So we are too kind of like in that kind of setting. That's just how I look at it, to say they had this choice. We are in the world, but we are not of it. They are in Babylon, it's captivity, and you'll find that the way they are responding there. So it's not total rebellion, but there's a clear line. They set clear boundaries to say we cannot remove ourselves from this situation right now, but we are going to stick with the culture of that is in touch with our worship, with our faith, and they stick to that. And it's a clear way of saying we will not be contaminated in this way. We will not be indoctrinated into this culture. Yeah. So I think it's pretty much when I remember when I've been watching even like films on slavery, and people being made to forget who they were, even the name changes and all that. So forget who you are, forget where you've come from. We're trying to change you, to shape you to be this person. So we'll find that systems of the world pretty much do that. You get into any organization, there is a culture, and you pretty much follow that. Amazingly, yesterday I had a nice conversation with a young gentleman, and he was so worried about, what was going on. Lost their church leader, and he was very worried for his future and the future of his children and family. Pretty much like, how do we carry on? Because all he knows is what has been around him, and it's become like a way that's been so drummed. And I had to say to him, can you actually see a bigger picture? God doesn't just look and confine you to just a denomination. You belong to a kingdom that is much broader than this. And so you don't need to be sad, like that. And yes, it's sad that we've lost someone, but it doesn't mean that God's plan then stops here. This is a kingdom that's broader than just a denomination, or broader than just this one person. And you need to think about, what do you have in your hands? What has been imparted in you to pick up the baton and you continue running the race? Paul encourages us, run the race that's set before you. So each one, we have that responsibility. So I think, we do have these guys. I don't know if you also looked at their names, because let me see which verse this is, because you said sort of verse 8, but just where it's ended on the border there, and you're just looking at, God is my judge. That's Daniel. His name changed to Belshazzar. You are the prince of Bel.
Yeah.
The name Hananiah, beloved of the Lord, changed to Shadrach, illuminated by the sun God. So you see, what's changing their names. It's clear. Need to change their identity, change who they are, break them until they conform all of who they are. And this is what the world does to us. This is what world systems do. Anything that is being set up in the worldly way is trying to change your mindset, conform. So you stop thinking, you stop reasoning, you stop using your own brain. It's like, just follow this way, and this is just the way. So I think I pretty much see that, and the Bible says we should not conform with the world, but we should be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So I think this is what I see in them. And obviously Meshach, who is as God, changed to Mishael, changed to Meshach. Mishael, who is as God, changed to Meshach, which means who is like Shach. It was just trying to break and remove that meaning of God in them. Azariah, the Lord is my help, changed to Abednego, servant of Nego. So they were very bent on other gods and their gods in this time, in this place they were in. And so these guys have chosen to stick with their God. And there is obviously that effort. So I think this is why, because there is clearly an effort to actually make them forget their God and begin to bow to other gods. Yeah.
And it takes some strength of character and faith when you've been honoured to be put into the position that they've been put in, and they could have chosen just not to eat the food and eat their own food, but they've been completely transparent with the eunuch, and they've spoken to them and asked if they can not defile themselves with the food. So it's not even that they've kept what they're feeling challenged about and what they feel they should and shouldn't do to themselves in private. They're being completely open about it. And I think, although that's scary, sometimes that can cause people to respect you more because you've stood up for what you have, and sometimes it can go the other way. And I think by being open, it was such a risk for them and for the eunuch, for them to lose their position or worse. And for the eunuch, he was worried about what the king would do if he's refused their food and then they were unhealthy. But to have such a strength of faith that you can go against the grain and trust that God is going to bring you through. and not just bring you through and scrape you through, but to bring you through to be stronger and more healthy than everyone else around you.
Mm. I think you're so right there, Laura. Because when we look at who we are and what our purpose is, we are here for the assignments of God, and each one of us carries that. And we it's about the bigger picture, the kingdom. And so it's very important to be able to stand that. And I think above all, I like how they just did that very respectfully. They've not been like defiant, but they've been very assertive in what they are convicted about. They've been open about it. Then that pretty much leaves it to the one that's receiving. So I think certainly we need to have that boldness to bring out, because you'll find that we are all made different vessels, and sometimes you can't just roll on a path of following because each person hears and gets an understanding, gets a revelation of how they understand things to do the kingdom assignments and ways of doing. So if you have someone who just says to you, and then it becomes like it's doctrine, and yet it's not, to say, maybe just don't go and speak to people on the streets, Laura. And you actually know that God is actually saying, Laura, go out and speak to that person on the streets. Which one are you going to follow? What are you going to do? So it's still to communicate that to the next person, but in a way that honors them. You're making them aware that it's not about trying to break me, to make me conform to how you view things, because you are that kind of vessel, and maybe that's how God uses you. But it doesn't mean that God has a formula, only one formula, and that's it. Because he doesn't. And so you are going to have to explain, I may not understand, how can Laura do that? And I can't speak to people on the streets. But that's Laura, and there's grace for that, and because that's the kind of vessel she is. And so they are having to explain their way of doing things, their way of understanding. And they have the relationship with God. So they know, what boundaries they shouldn't cross, how they ought to do things. And you can see that even from, how God has named them. There's this conviction of, God is with me. God is my helper. And indeed, I also think that names are very powerful. And what we speak forth is very powerful. So yeah, there's a lot here, I think, that is very encouraging out of what's happening with these guys.
Yeah. And I think the faithfulness that Daniel and all of them have comes from knowing God intimately. You don't get that through living someone else's faith or just saying I follow God and not actually doing anything about it. I think, like Andy was talking about on Sunday about the secret place, I think it comes from spending time in God's presence, so you know his voice, you know what he's asking you to do and not to do. Because as you say, we all get called to do things differently, because we all have a unique purpose and as a unique identity. And so knowing what God's saying to us is so important, because just because they've chosen to eat vegetables doesn't mean we have to choose to eat vegetables. I know we're in different times, so there's different ways of doing things, but it could be quite easy, as you say, to follow what someone else is doing and what God's called someone else to do if we're not spending that time in the secret place with our Father and hearing what he has to say to us individually.
Mm-hmm. And that the danger normally is in trying to build a standardized kind of system, which sometimes doesn't work for everybody, because then it means we are all kind of doing things in that way. Yeah. I think that way it creates people who just kind of go with a mantra rather than go with what God is saying, because God is a creative God, and we have to always be like hearing his voice. He says, my sheep hear my voice, and we begin to do that. So I sometimes, it's very sad when you hear people say, I'm very scared, I don't know if I feel to actually go and do this is my purpose, but I'm actually very scared. I don't know how this is going to look. And I'm thinking, no, just probably just discuss that. So you begin to find that fear and other barriers, they become like barriers to stop actually just that hearing God and responding to God. That secret place you're talking about, that intimacy with God, is you hear God and you respond to God. So yeah, and there was a real threat of punishment here, but you find that they ride over that fear, because there was real threat of being punished for them not actually doing that. And this was a cruel system that had put them into captivity. So they actually know what could be coming their way. Yeah. So yeah, I think you it's very encouraging. And just because they were eating vegetables doesn't mean you and I go and do that. And I know sometimes sometimes people, this is a very crucial part that's usually quoted by many people. So I'm doing the Daniel fast. Why are you doing the Daniel fast? Is it just because everybody else is doing the Daniel fast? What did that mean? If that was fast, why did they have to choose vegetables? I think that question was a very, very key question, Laura.
Yeah.
Why do I have to? So when the Bible's, is telling us, sometimes we end up following men and men's systems and men's rules rather than what God said. And we don't have to dishonor people, but we can actually just gently make them aware, bring to light what the Lord is saying. And if we're convinced about that, we are followers of Jesus, not necessarily followers of men. Yeah.
And I think something you mentioned earlier about the way they respectfully declined what they were offered, I think that's so important as well, because I think it's quite easy when you're caught up in faith and believing what you're doing and saying is right, that sometimes people can react maybe emotionally or angrily or defiantly, and I don't think that would have the same response as having a measured approach where you go and you speak what you feel God is saying.
Yeah. Very, very, very true. Very, very true. Because the idea should be, I think for them here, what was important was bringing out what their belief was. And because it says, Daniel purposed in his heart, making up his mind before, he would do anything, not to compromise. Yeah. So sometimes it depends. Yeah, you've got to make. It's like when someone is just saying, Laura, I thought this was going, totally misunderstanding you. And you just think, I have to make this, clarify what I'm saying. Or you can just leave it. So sometimes you clarifying what you're saying, or what that means for you is important. Because then you might find that they understand. And maybe for them just thought, they're just vegetables, harmless. And it's also, I think, the how much do you explain? How much do you explain? I don't see them really explaining the entire, thing about this. And then our faith is like this. Then, it's just putting very simple words. And yet, in those simple words, there was a lot that we from our angle understand than probably those people understood. Yeah, there's quite a lot there. We know what it means for us and our God, and not to compromise in the things and we are living in those times where, a lot is going on in the workplaces. There's a lot of censorship on things. There are things that you can say, there are things that you can't say. Yeah. And whatever it looks like, if it's coming from somebody who's, they're pretty much, captives at this point without much of a choice. So it could be someone thinking, how do I even put this across to someone who's more senior? It's difficult. However way you put it across, it still may sound as defiant. It still may sound as you're rebellious, you're arrogant or whatever. It will still come across as that if someone is so bent on their way and not hearing it, what you're saying. Just this week, I was talking to somebody who was going through so much pain, and they just couldn't understand how someone could not stop for 5 seconds to hear someone's heart that was bleeding. And all they could do was just think of themselves. And they said, I'm talking to someone, telling someone how I'm feeling, and they're busy telling me what they are feeling and what they're going through. At that point, they forgot their role was to listen and show some bit of empathy, at least some bit of understanding. And they failed to do that. They just kept going on and on with themselves. They became so self-centered that they forgot, hang on, why is this person telling me, about their bleeding heart? And what can I say to somebody who has a bleeding heart? So it's also here. I think you can see that there's a listening, even though these people are captives. But there is that listening to this. The way that communication happens is actually very amazing.
Yeah, I think good points, Tandy. I think where they've been respectful but they've stood up for what they believe is right. They haven't said they need to step away from their position at all. They're still staying in the position that they've been given, if that makes sense. They're still, I don't even know how to make my words make sense, but do you know what I mean? They haven't stormed off and said, I'm not doing this because you've tried to make me eat something. They've decided, actually, I can still stay in this position, but I can stand up for what I believe is right.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at something.
Just checking in case their hands.
If
not, then we make it a conversation, but we don't want to dominate and then others don't see. Okay.
So just looking. Sorry, carry on, Tandy.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say that even if they were going to protest or whatever it was, it's still courteous, and like you're saying, because I think we really live in these times. For us, this captivity is, and what looks like Babylon to us is the different laws, the different things that are coming our way. This is just going to enter into every system. This is being brought into education. This is being brought into things that we actually don't believe in, some of them. And then you'll find that people are having to being put in a place where, if not careful, there's a fine line between compromising your faith or not, or risking actually losing your job. So these are the times and the seasons that we live in. People are being pushed to do certain things in the workplaces that they don't want to do, or deliver certain material they don't want to do, to deliver they don't believe in, or even subject our children to it. So it's just all sorts that's coming our way. And so this standing as the believer, standing as the people of God is very, very important. We find ourselves in this situation, I think, time and time again, where these men are in, Daniel and his friends are in. And so I think, yes, it really could have been different. But I think it's a very bold step, but it's always very, very, very tough when you are in that position, because the one who has the power and the authority can decide either way to use it. Either way. So they could have just thought, we are on the losing end anyway, but I think they just trusted God with it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I think I always love, Mandy likes to say, in the beginning, God. And in the process, in the course of everything, God. It all ends, God. So we need to run this race always keeping that in focus, that everything must just be wrapped up in God. So no matter what it looks like from either end, either side, at the end of the day, it's just God. And also a lot of our understanding will be in line with the purpose, in alignment with who God has called us to be. Normally, that's how we see and view things. And they're just bringing that this is who we are, this is what we believe in our God. And
Stephen, it's good to have you back. You had your hand up a moment ago. Have you put it back down because you don't want to share anymore?
Do you want to read it again? Should we read it again, or is that? Not worth it.
Let's see what Stephen has to share, and then maybe we can.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I did put it up because obviously I was concerned for our dear sister. It was like, wow, this is a personal testimony of something that actually happened. So, yeah, when you hear somebody that's not showing the bedside manner, which taught to, to show, and it's just it's pride, full of themselves. But yeah, we'll talk about after. I'll just check, Tandy. You sound good anyway. Which is good. But yeah, you're going through trials and tribulation at that.
No, that wasn't me, Stephen. I didn't say that was me.
Oh yeah, so it was. I thought it was a Paul thing.
But happy to chat with you.
Yeah. So apologies,
no.
but I got the wrong end.
No. Yeah.
I thought it was a Paul thing. I know, man. And it's. She's talking about herself. I hope you're right. So my
we can
apologies.
all be like that. We can all be like that, me included. So it's just what we learn. Yeah.
That's right. And look, it's good to roll in. I mean, I'm going through tests, and it's good to roll in personal things, really, because otherwise it's all theory. And you've got to say, yeah, it happened to me yesterday, or happened to me last week, or I know what this is talking. In one sense, it's talking about a historic thing. But what's the point in talking about history if we can't learn from it? Anyway, so I just went through quickly. See, and I don't mean to go. I assume it's verse 8 to 21.
We've gone up to 16 so far.
Okay, yeah. I won't go too far. I won't go back too far either. Verse 8. Yeah, this is good rules for being a Christian. Yeah, Daniel says he resolved. See, it's something you got to do in your mind. He would not defile himself or his mates. But it's first of all, it's up to you to not defile yourself. And what happens when you do that? God gives you favour and compassion, even in the realm of the heathen, the Gentiles, or as they were then. But it's just people who don't know God. And see, you can't get too theological. Oh yes, be careful with food and drink. No, read the New Testament. Yeah, everything is lawful. Might be beneficial. They go eating shark's fin that will you can die through, that they do in Japan. It's like Russian roulette. So 9, compassion. See, Lord gave him compassion, which Anyway, number 12. See, he said, I won't defile myself. And he said to the guy, he didn't offend him, the king of wherever he is in Egypt, I'm guessing, somewhere like that. And so he's tested, actually, by the guy, because he said, well, I don't want to offend you. I can't really eat that stuff. That's my culture. And so he's tested in 12. So let's test for 10 days. That's a good test. If you're thinking I'm failing something, or I've resolved not to do something, not to defile myself, a 10-day test is a perfect number. A 40-day test is also a perfect number for testing. If you make 10, you're on the way. Times by 4, 4 more quarters, and you've passed with flying colours if you can do it for 40 days. And okay, and then I'll shut now. Let our appearance and appearance of the youth. So let my boys and your boys be compared, and let me know what you see in the test. What results are we going to get? And we know you've read all this. So he listened to them in his mouth. He said, "Yeah, that's good. I like the sound of that. End it in 10 days, just like you said, and we'll see who looks more healthy." Anyway. And so they said they won't defile themselves with. Be careful. Be careful with certain foods and certain drinks, especially those that intoxicate you. Now you say, "Oh yeah, of course you're talking about wine and alcohol." Yeah, it's true. But if chocolate intoxicates you, be careful with it. Yeah. If I've been told, watch yourself. with saturated fat and sugar. And they said salt. That's not a problem for me, salt. But anyway, that's here endeth the sermon. So let's see what other people. If I get any slayers or naysayers.
I think that's really good points, and I think we all have things that God gives us that we are challenged by, or is what we need to work towards, or things that we need to deal with. And as we talked about earlier, that's an individual thing. God gives us all something individual that we need to work through. And I think what you're saying about watching certain things is knowing what your weaknesses are, what the things are that you struggle with, and letting God help you through that with it. And the testing as well is just knowing that God is in it, and that he's definitely told you that, and what you're doing is showing what God said to you through action, if that kind of makes sense. I have to go promptly at 10, but Tandy, if you want to share something as you've got your hand up, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, really great points there, Steve. I think with that testing there, the great lesson for me is always like linking up with what you're saying there, Laura, about that we all have something to work on, weaknesses and things. And how do you actually know it? How do you work at it? As the scripture says about working out our salvation with fear and trembling. Now, working at something does take testing it out. It does take, we put our foot forward in faith and we test it out. We walk it out in faith. Some things we'll actually never know. That's why I say, it's putting everything to the test. If God has said this, and I love how the Bible also encourages us that He orders our steps. So sometimes we don't know the whole journey. We don't know the whole way. But unless we take that first step, how will we ever know? So I think with what these guys have also done, you can see the hand of the Lord in there. He consented with them in this matter. And so that's God opening that door. And the chief of the eunuchs, had all that power. And he gives them that consent and gives them that 10 days. And the result was their features appeared better and fatter. And again, you see how God just came through for them. So God always does come through for us. The test is, we when we're doing it in faith, doing it because we've heard His voice, doing it because we desire that improvement. How else do we improve unless we try, unless we take those necessary steps? How do we actually improve anything if we'll just continue hearing Him and waiting and just listening? That first step He gives is enough. He says, I order your steps. So I take the next step and then I hear. He says, now you take this step, and before you know it, you're actually running. Because, I love how Paul puts it. It's a race. It's not a race of the swift, but it's certainly a race of response, responding to taking the steps that God is giving each one of us. The things that can intoxicate us can actually include our, disobedience. They can include that pride, that arrogance, those things that can even stop us from, making those changes that we need to change, that awareness that you're saying, talking about what's inside of me. What is those areas, those weaknesses, those things I need to change. And it's very hard when someone else highlights those for us. But it's always better when we can actually sit down ourselves and actually review that and say, what do I need to change? Or I just maintain my position of it's okay the way it is. I think that's always the difficult part to do. But I think this testing and the steps are very, very crucial in how we actually get things to move and to change and to deal with our weaknesses, deal with our emotions, deal with whatever else, is God may be showing us. Thank you.
Thanks, Tandy. Go for it, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it seems agreeable to you, Laura, and everybody here, just to I don't know how much of the it's a sort of just to get onto the dessert. I like a dessert.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so
we'll do a quick dessert and then maybe continue it tomorrow.
Yeah, no problems. No problems. So because otherwise it is a real cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So yeah. God gave Daniel gifts, and that's what is going to be tested. And his integrity. Sorry, that's the word I'm looking. Will he, will he say, "Oh, that's all right, give me a bit of that food," or "Give me all that wine that's like fun," etc. So his integrity, that's the word I'm looking for. Anyway, just going back to 17, and so here we are. So they're all on the veg, that's great stuff. And we're going to go to the veg when on the new heaven and the new earth. So you're going to forget all the meat. Enjoy it. If you love it, enjoy it now. You got carte blanche, but that'll be off the menu. Okay. As for these youths, God gave them skill, learning and skill in all literature and wisdom. All literature and wisdom. What were you saying? The Haynes car manual. Yeah, of course. You open that car manual. You go, this engine works. Why it's not starting? Your battery's dead. I had to go. That's what it says in here. And I understood it anyway. That's just confirmation. See, hang on. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. See, I said to the Lord, look, Daniel was the king. Because who else in the Bible it says he had understanding in all visions and dreams? Tell me, because I'm looking for the Josephs and the Moses and all this stuff. Yeah, the Marys and he's the king. So I say that, Lord, many times said, Lord, give me a bit of that, please. I like to be. I want some of that anointing. We've all got it, but we need more of it to understand the visions and the dreams. Understand what we see. I mean, it's the same with surely shouldn't we understand what we see with our natural eyes? Yeah, sure. What's happening? Oh, that building's about to fall down. Whoa, should understand what you're seeing. So he had understanding all visions and dreams. And at the time of the end, when the king had commanded them that they should be brought in, the chief of all the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them. Among all of them, there was none found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Araziah. Wow, there was none found, because they were the top dudes in the land, and they weren't even natives. Okay, they stood before the king, and here we go again. Every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians, enchanters that were in all his kingdom. Wow, do the maths. It's like that is 10 times all the kingdom. How many of those? I don't know, but it's got to be 1,000 of them. That's at least 10,000 times better, right? And Daniel, I mean, no wonder he wanted him in the palace. And Daniel was there until the very first year of King Cyrus. So anyhow, I think, I'll shut up now, because I love this. So just notice, he takes no pride, Daniel, and his cohorts, because in 9, and God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the eunuchs. Where is it? Sorry. Somewhere it says it's a gift. I'll find it. Sometimes you lose. It's all a gift. It's all grace of the Lord. Anyway, enough of that. We've got 3 minutes, and I'll shut up. Definitely.
Thank you. I was hoping that we would get to read those last 2 verses before we finish. So thank you for taking us there. But yeah, it's so important, isn't it, to remember that everything that we have, all the good things that we have, is a gift from God, like you say. That but how amazing it is that not only does, as the earthly king called them to be in the position they're in, but God obviously wants them there too. And by giving them everything that he has, by putting them through the test of the diet and coming through stronger and fatter than everyone else, and then giving them the skill in literature and wisdom and understanding visions and dreams and all these things that you've just listed, it's just such an encouragement that God can give us all those things and put us in the place that he wants us to be in for us to thrive. So that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I put my hand back up just because it's like I write it down now so I can remember. So I certainly don't want to dominate, but I wrote down two things. Do not see. Daniel resolved he would not defile himself. Yeah, don't think this is just food and drink. This is every food and drink that gets in your system. Do not defile yourself with your eyes, because otherwise, yeah, he wouldn't have been able to understand every vision and every dream. Do not defile your ears. Yeah, be careful what you listen to. Be careful who you listen to. You have to say, yeah, I kind of like what you're saying, but no, every time you say that, it's there's something wrong here. And you can say to the person in private, say, look, you're a good guy, it seems, but you keep saying this, and that's really, I can't, so, yeah, or, there's certain, you can turn the TV and see a, documentary or something, or it's like, oh, I've had enough of that. I can't take it anymore. Turn it off. Do not defile your tongue. Every sense this goes to. Do not defile what you touch. Yeah. And what's the other one? Taste what you taste. Yeah. And there's one more. There's 5 of them.
Smell.
Yeah. What you smell. Yeah. Yeah. Because you should smell roses. And if you smell the sulfur, that is the only, according to the scientists, check it out, or you chemists, sulfur is the only smell which you can't ever rid yourself of. If you keep smelling it, you have to say, this smells like, that unquenchable fire. It's like, I can't stand it smells too much of that. Anyway, let's leave on the positive note. Yeah, keep your mind's eye, mind's ears, all the spiritual senses undefiled. Otherwise, you're like, I don't know what I'm seeing. It's like putting something in your eye, and you're like, well, I can't see. Anyway,
Thank you. Tandy, did you have a last quick point before we go off air?
Just to say, great points there, Steve. Because that then clouds judgment. That then clouds what we hear, and I think it's so important. We were talking about the gifts and that integrity, and I just picked on the keywords that Stephen brought there. And all those senses need to be alert. I think that's my reflection and take home from even that example I gave. That is important because we're running with the purposes of God, so it's important to keep those senses nice, alert. Why does this look off? Why does this smell off? What is it that I'm hearing? What not, hear what people are saying, not what they're not saying. And the tongue and there's, speaking when we need to make sure that it's heard correctly. And hearing ourselves. Sometimes, if I'm just going me, and I'm playing my me record, I need to say stop. Why is it that I'm just talking about me? Can I stop and just put myself in the shoes of this other person and hear correctly? And that person, the same would actually hear each other correctly. We would actually be using our senses in a way that better helps us and helps situations rather than retreat into our own selves again, or maybe not even change the things that God is showing us, because that gives us nice pointers. What does that look like? What does it smell like? What does that sound like? What's that tasting like? Yeah, thank you.
That's great. Thank you, you two, and Carolyn for the time that she was with us. I'm going to take us off YouTube now. It's been a great discussion this morning, and I look forward to hopefully joining you tomorrow. So I shall take us off YouTube now. Thank you.